The Cold War was in full force in 1982 when a new general secretary of the Communist Party, Yuri Andropov, took power in the Soviet Union. Anxiety was reaching a fever pitch over rising tensions and growing stockpiles of nuclear weapons. Jane Smith, a social worker living in Maine, remembers sharing her worries with her 10-year-old daughter, Samantha. At her mother's suggestion, Samantha wrote to the new Soviet leader. Here's a reading of part of her letter.
I've been worrying about Russia and the United States getting into a nuclear war. Are you going to vote to have a war or not? If you aren't, please tell me how you are going to help to not have a war.
Samantha wrote these words in December of 1982. Her letter set off a media frenzy in both the U.S. and USSR after it was published in a Moscow newspaper the following spring. Samantha's mother says it nearly caught them off guard.
Arthur hit me at the door with, "You won't believe what's happened today. The press is going to be here at 8 or 8:30.
Despite her age, the press didn't faze Samantha, who became an international sensation.
She was able to handle it. It was amazing.
That April, Andropov wrote back and invited Samantha and her parents to visit the USSR. Jane Smith says they were happy to accept.
I mean, it was an amazing trip. We were treated like, guests of the government, which we were.
In the Soviet Union, Samantha met with officials and cultural icons, including Valentina Tereshkova, the first woman in space. The press followed Samantha at nearly every step. One highlight was a trip to Artek, a Soviet summer camp in the Crimean Peninsula, where Samantha became friends with Soviet children.
They all loved her, and she was a star here.
That's Olga Volkova. She was in charge of planning Samantha's visit to the elite summer camp.
It was a great responsibility and a lot of fears because we were all afraid of Americans at the time.
Samantha traveled to the Soviet Union at a time when mistrust flourished. President Reagan had recently announced his Strategic Defense Initiative to deter nuclear ballistic missiles. Natalia Batova worked for the Union of Soviet Friendship Societies and acted as Samantha's host during the trip. She says Samantha's well-publicized visit helped to alleviate tension.
Her visit was like a breakthrough for Russian people, This bright American girl was speaking from her own, and that was her voice.
Jane Smith was stunned that her daughter impressed and charmed the Soviet people she met, including high-ranking officials. It came as a complete surprise, she says, as Samantha had never been an especially dedicated student.
This child who seemed to do nothing but giggle in the last few months was suddenly serious when they turned the camera on her and asked her questions and was amazingly articulate, sort of like the letter.
Samantha became famous as a goodwill ambassador between the two rival nations. Natalia Batova says that Samantha was highly regarded in the Soviet Union despite the political stalemate.
Yes, I wish we remember her forever because that is the brightest example of your people.
The Smith family returned to the U.S. on July 22nd. 2 years later, Samantha and her father were killed in a plane crash. Samantha was just 13 years old. Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev and President Ronald Reagan both sent condolence letters to her mother. Although the Cold War is a distant memory, Samantha's lesson remains as relevant as ever. For the Voice of Russia American edition, I'm Molly Seder in Washington. Victoria Mashkova contributed reporting.